Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone. It is the Tuesday, March 17th, 2026 episode of The Marco Dure Show. Thank you for tuning in here. Today's groundbreaking news right here in America and across the board, where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. Let's begin the best hour of radio, informative, uncensored, unapologetic, and ready to go. First things first, happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone that's listening. Hope everyone has a great day ahead of them, as always. I want to go over an article today in Just the News to start things off, just to get things rolling. Joe Kent, on Tuesday now, has stepped down as the head of the National Counterterrorism Center, citing his opposition to the ongoing war inside Iran. He took to X to say that after much reflection, I have decided to resign from my position as the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, effective today. I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no immediate threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. Now, that's quite a loaded statement he put out there, but he's absolutely right about this. I've asked everyone in this audience several times now, what is the main objective of this conflict? Why did we go to war with Iran? And we get different things from different people inside the government, but I asked the question specifically, what was the imminent threat that could have possibly sparked this conflict? Nobody can answer that question. Iran does not have nuclear weapons, so that couldn't pose any type of threat to the United States. It couldn't have been their ballistic missile program, because none of those missiles could reach the United States. They don't have that capacity to do so. We talk about Iranian sleeper cells now. That's the new big thing, Iranian sleeper cells. There's no evidence that anybody that committed any of these terror acts inside the United States had anything to do with Iran. Not one thing at all. These are largely individual attacks from people, yes. Maybe they're driven by their ideology, of course, but there's no link to Iran in all this. So there isn't. Not at all. So it seems like Kent is the most now senior member of the administration to resign over the Iran conflict. He was a very close ally to the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who also, like he, was very adamant about not starting this war with Iran. And in his letter of resignation, he told President Trump that I supported the values and the foreign policies that you campaigned on in 2016, 2020, 2024, which you enacted in your first term. And he's absolutely right about all this. He's, again, 100% correct on all this. President Trump ran on no forever wars. And what do we find ourselves in? Getting into another war with no end in sight. Now they're projecting it might go on until, a couple more weeks, 4 or 5 weeks. By April, we'll be out of this. How many times have we heard that before? Now, until June of 2025, he goes on to say, you understood that the wars in the Middle East were a trap that robbed the American people of the precious lives of our patriots and the depleted wealth and prosperity of our nation. Absolutely. How many trillions of dollars have we spent on these wars? These regime changes. And what have we gotten in return from this? Refugees coming from all these war-torn areas into Europe and the United States? How's that been for the world? I don't think it's been a beacon of hope, has it? Again, go look at some of the major cities throughout Europe right now that are bringing in these refugees. I don't think it's becoming a more conducive environment. And the hell with multiculturalism. When you have people that do not want to assimilate to our values, go look no further than Dallas, Texas, if you want to see what I'm talking about there. This is a problem all throughout the Western world, folks. Not just indicative of the United States. This is happening in every Western country because of open borders, because of these loose immigration policies these countries are enacting, and it's not leading to a much more effective society. In fact, things are getting much, much worse as time goes on. And I don't say that to you as saying that someone from any of these countries cannot adapt to the United States. I'm not saying that. But when you bring in people unchecked, unfettered, as a large group into the United States at once, it's not showing us any sign that it's making America better or the West better at all. So I'm not shocked to see this, to be honest with you. I don't know if he'll be one of many people that will go ahead and do this. But he understands this position, that this is not a war we need to be involved in. And this guy is the head of counterterrorism. So I think he would know if Iran poses a threat to the United States. He's saying they're not. Well, that's exactly what I've said since the start of this war and before this war started. I said Iran poses no national security risk to the United States. Nothing. So why would we get involved in this? But he makes the correct point, saying we had pressure from Israel. Netanyahu positioned President Trump and said, hey, we got them all in the same room. Let's go attack now. Now's our chance. Now's our chance to do this. But the attack failed because the decapitation strike was not effective. And that's the problem with all this. Trump was expecting that day for that government to fall. Netanyahu was expecting that government that day to fall. We'd usher in Pahlavi or whoever the hell we decided, and that we'd be seen as the heroes. We saved Iran, right? Even though we know right now most of the government is not behind all that. Of course, the people certainly are not behind all that. The government didn't fall apart. It stayed as is because it effectively is a democracy, and people are elected to these positions, and people are replaced should something happen to these people, just like it would be in the United States. That's what the American people don't understand, though, about Iran. They think it's just this crackpot dictatorship, right, that would just fall apart at the top, head honcho falls down. Well, that didn't happen. And the opposite now is that he's now martyred. All the Shia Muslims, which make up the vast majority of Iran, support this man. And even people inside Iraq now are very upset about him being assassinated the way he was. So this war is far from over because, again, how do you complete your objectives when the objective is regime change and that regime is still holding tight? You know, President Trump can go boast on Fox News all he wants. By the way, I was reading the chyrons before the show began, saying, hey, we destroyed their entire Navy. Well, that's fine, I guess. I don't know what that has to do with taking the country. In order for effective regime change, you need to control what takes place on the ground. You can bomb the country into oblivion. Look no further than Gaza right now. Gaza lie in ruins because of what Israel's done and the IDF. Over 83% of the country is just destroyed. It's decimated. It's uninhabitable. But yet, somehow, folks, Hamas is still very much in charge of what's taking place on the ground there. Whether you want to admit that or not, that's the truth of the matter. And this is a small paramilitary group inside this territory. And we think we're going to destroy a country the size of Western Europe, of 93 million people, by dropping bombs on several targets, military targets, and installations? It's just not going to go over the way people think it's going to go over. I think that's the biggest misconception with all this. People hear that, yes, we decimated their navy, their ships are at the bottom of the Persian Gulf, or what have you, wherever the ship may have been, right? Or, yes, we hit 7,000 targets inside of Iran, and that sounds impressive, doesn't it? Well, yeah, of course, we have an impressive military. We can hit targets. I'm not saying we can't. But we're not stopping the government from functioning as is. And they are not stepping down. If you listen to yesterday's show, you heard Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi say exactly that this war will end on our terms. And they're very much adamant about that. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. Their sentiment about this war will go on so long as we continue to fight them. Which is why I've said to you, President Trump needs to get out of this war. However he wants to sell it to the American people, we accomplished our dream of, saving Iran. Whatever he wants to say, I could care less, right? I could care less. Just get us out of this conflict. But I'm going to close with this because, again, he finishes the article off very, very brilliantly. And he further warned, this is, again, Joe Kent, that Trump has been subjected to an echo chamber of false support for the war to lead him into the false impression that such a conflict held a swift path to victory. Absolutely 100%. It's almost like this guy listens to my show. Fantastic. Excellent, excellent analysis of what's going on here. Yes, Trump is in an echo chamber now. How many times have I asked you, who is advising the president on this? Who is giving him the facts on this? I honestly think he needs to have an actual meeting with the entire administration and really sit down with these advisors of all these administrations and really figure out what he needs to do here to stop this. Stop this quickly. Because this can't go on for much longer. The same tactic was used by the Israelis to get us into the Iraq War, which we all know how that went. And we cannot keep making these same mistakes. President Trump assured us this when he ran. In fact, he was opposed to any war in Iran. And yet here we are, fighting Iran. One of the last of the 7 countries that General Wesley Clark told us were on the list of us to create regime change in. And yet here we are fighting them right now in 2026. I did not have that on my bingo card, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, as my list of things that would happen in 2026 under the Trump administration, of all things. And, one more thing I want to say. He's absolutely right. President Trump was the president of peace during his first term. That's what we liked about it so much. He bombed, I believe, just one country. He bombed Syria with, I think it was 51 Tomahawk missiles, if I'm not mistaken. That was it. And again, I spoke out against that at the time as well. There was no need for that. But that was what was being sold to us, that al-Assad was using chemical weapons on his people, which again was ridiculous, using sarin nerve gas. Again, I implore anyone to study what sarin nerve gas does to you. It kills you instantly. Even if you touch sarin nerve gas, it kills you instantly. That's how toxic it is. And yet we saw the footage of people bear crawling, army crawling on the ground after they just got hit with it, and people are pulling them away. All those people would be dead, folks. So, crisis actors to a T. I don't know what to say about that. I don't know if they were hit with something else, but they certainly weren't hit with sarin nerve gas. I'll just tell it to you that way. So I don't know if Ken is going to be one of the first few people that creates this domino effect of people leaving this administration. I don't know if that's how we'll see things. But we're starting to see people on the right now starting to come out and say, listen, this is not right. This has got to stop. This is not good for the United States. This is not good for the world economy. And we're creating this global supply chain bottlenecking now that's taking place, especially with the oil and liquefied natural gas. That's not doing any favors for anybody. And I think President Trump understands this. I think he sees this. And he's got to find a way to get out of this. What could be a path to get out of this for him? Now, I can't say for sure what he'll want to do. I don't think he'll accept defeat. But maybe he does what he did in Yemen, for example. Just stop it, pull out, and say, hey, we won. Even though the Houthi rebels are still very much effective inside Yemen today. And by the way, will probably be effective in this war should it continue to go on as well. Just so we understand that. And just to illustrate the progress we're making in this conflict, the Times of Israel have now stated that they've been informed, for example, the United States this week, that they're running critically low on ballistic missile interceptors as the conflict with Iran continues on. Again, haven't I been telling you this? Now, while this is an unsubstantiated, unconfirmed report, I hold this as true. I hold this as true because we know that, especially inside Tel Aviv, inside Haifa, the Iranians are really hitting those targets at a much more effective pace because Iron Dome is failing right now. So no, while there is no confirmation of the report, why would the Times of Israel tell us this? Because that's what's taking place. That's what's happening right now. It says the report claims the United States has been aware for months that Israel has a low capacity right now of their interceptors, adding that the United States is not running low on interceptors of its own. So that would be coming out of our military bases from the region, but Israel itself is struggling right now. And a lot of it probably has to do with what took place during the 12-day war. They weren't replenished fully before we went into this. They weren't expecting this type of attack or retaliation from Iran. They underestimated Iran. It was unplanned. The strategy was not there. They didn't know how to react should Iran lob all these missiles into Israel, or military bases all throughout the region, especially inside the Gulf. Now, a U.S. official is quoted in this saying it's something we expected and anticipated. We have all that we need to protect our bases and our personnel in the region and our interest. Well, again, how is everyone getting hit? How are we getting hit right now, especially in these areas, our bases, if everything's working so well? We have a plethora of this capacity to go on. Nobody answers that. So the official says that Israel's coming up with solutions to address the purported shortage right now, though Iran has been firing several missiles a day, and a critical storage would mean Israel would have fewer than 10 receptors left. That is unbelievably low. And I keep asking you this as well. What does Israel do next? What does Israel do if Tel Aviv keeps getting pounded and Haifa keeps getting pounded and their ports are depleted and their refineries are struck? What are they going to do? And one more thing I think we all need to be very much aware of. Both Tel Aviv and Haifa have roughly, I think, about 55% of the overall population inside Israel. Again, it's a very small country. What happens when these cities start getting hit more and more and more, and everything just gets destroyed? What happens to these people? Where do they go? Because they're certainly not going to be able to live there if it continues to be barraged by missiles. So you have to understand, is this going to cause a mass exodus of people living in Israel to flee? Is it going to be like California? People are just going to get the hell out of there? It could mean that. If people don't feel safe, they will take what they have and they will leave. The question is, where do these people go? That's the other part of the question. What is Israel's future after all this? Does Israel even have a future? Only time will tell. Or if they resort to something like, for example, their Samson option, which I don't know if that will take place. I really don't know. If they would use nuclear weapons against Iran, I don't know. But this is getting to a point where Tel Aviv's getting hit pretty bad, folks. And they're not letting you see the footage of this. We saw that with CNN just recently. Oh, there's incoming missiles, but the Israeli government won't let us show you what's taking place. So we're going to point the camera down at the ground, and we'll continue to talk to you and BS you. That's reporting in the United States today. So another thing that tells me that things are not going as planned was our report last week. You had South Korea and Japan being told to give the United States back a lot of these defensive missiles that we've given them. Why would we be doing that if we have unlimited supply? That's what President Trump said. Everything's unlimited. But really, that's not the case right now. And additionally, the report claims that Iran's launch of these cluster munitions now may exacerbate the depletion of the stock that they have right now. Well, no kidding. You have a missile that midair will disperse several other small warheads from it and hit their targets. And obviously, Iron Dome has to try to intercept all of these at once. So you probably have to fire much more up in the sky. So this is the reality of the situation now. So what happens to Israel in particular? What happens to our military bases? Do they get rebuilt? Do we spend the $100 billion to rebuild all of them? We're depleting our own stockpiles of our own missiles. And really the Arrow 2 and the Arrow 3 are some of the ones that are being discussed right now as being totally, again, wiped out right now as this war continues on. So things are not looking good right now, folks. Things are not looking good as the progress of this war goes on. And President Trump is not happy about this, too. How do I know this? Well, look what took place in Fox News yesterday. Look at this title. Trump warns NATO a very bad future if allies don't help secure the Strait of Hormuz, which, again, all of them are refusing to do right now. Now, he sent the clearest warning to NATO just yet on Sunday. Stand with the United States for defense of the Strait of Hormuz or face a very bad future. I don't know what that means. Maybe that means he'll go into Greenland. I have no idea. So I want to play you a short clip of him speaking. He was asked just recently about what NATO should do. What should their response be to this? And this is what he had to say.
We're always there for NATO. We're helping them with Ukraine. It's got an ocean in between us. Doesn't affect us, but we've helped them. It'd be interesting to see what country wouldn't help us with a very small endeavor, which is just keeping the strait open. That, by comparison, is it's small because Iran has very little firepower left.
Okay, so a couple things he's saying here now. He says they need to come help us. We're helping them with Ukraine. First of all, Ukraine is not even in NATO. So it shouldn't even be an issue for NATO that we're doing this still. And by the way, why are we still funding them right now? That's my other question. Why are we still funding Zelensky? Why are any of these countries allocating money to give this corrupt country that has no chance of defeating the Russians at all? Nobody can answer that. Yet, here we are. I mean, he really should say we're not helping NATO at all by getting them involved in this conflict. I mean, why would they want to pose risk to their own navy, their own fleet, to come in the region and possibly sink their ships? What would be the ploy for them to do all this? In a war that we started, a war of aggression? What is the purpose of this? Again, Iran did not attack the United States. The United States and Israel attacked Iran. That's what took place here. And now we want these other countries to get involved in this conflict with us? Why do you think Keir Starmer was so defensive as to getting in this conflict and even letting us use their military bases like Diego Garcia? He doesn't want to get involved in this. He doesn't want the UK bases to be hit in the region. And they know that they're up for grabs should anyone aid and abet the United States and Israel. It's just very much clear that that's what's taking place. So Trump is looking for these NATO allies' assistance in securing the oil tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz for the rest of the world. Now, the Trump administration officials have been repeating throughout the choking of the strait that the United States under President Trump is the net exporter of oil and gets only a fraction of its oil from the Middle East. Well, obviously, that's true. Unlike the rest of the world, including the NATO allies. So what he's doing is he's telling them to come and join, saying this is obviously beneficial for you. But they don't want to be dragged into this war. They don't want to extend their resources. They want to see it over with, I think. Just this morning, Italy says, hey, we're not getting involved in this. Giorgia Meloni said, no, we're not doing this. We're not getting involved in this. We decline this. And I can't blame any of them. I really can't. But here's the other part. In the end of this, he said, well, their missiles are getting really low, right? They're depleting. That's what he's referring to. Okay, well, if they're depleting all their missiles, if they're running low, what's the problem then? If they pose no threat, why not just go through the strait? Apparently, we took Carg Island. That's what we're saying right now. Right? We depleted their navy. So let's go out there and let's do this then. Let's aid and abet these ships to come through on our own then. Why aren't we doing this right now? Even in the United States, they're saying that could take weeks for that to even begin. So you got ships that are just sitting in the Persian Gulf or outside of it. They're not moving at all because they don't want to get hit. And only the ships that Iran says can go through will get through. So we bombed Carg Island. By the way, it's pronounced Kark with a K on the end of it, not a G. That's how they say it in Persian. But what did that do? They're still filling up oil tankers. They're still shipping them out, and they're still going towards China. Nothing's stopping that. Nothing's slowing that process down. So I don't know what. Again, President Trump. Again, this is part of the misstep. We didn't anticipate for this war to go on this long. Now we're in trouble. We see Israel's depleted with their missile systems. We're seeing Iron Dome fail. I don't see the Israel Navy saying, hey, we'll come help our wonderful ally, the United States. Right? We're always told in the media, our number one ally is Israel. Everyone listening has heard that time and time again. Okay, so let's get Israel to get their fleet in here with us, and we'll assist these ships through then. Let's do it. After all, it was Netanyahu's idea to start this. Marco Rubio confirmed that we went right behind them because they went in. That's what he said. They went in and we followed right behind them. That's what it comes down to. So this is obviously Netanyahu and Trump's doing. So let's let Netanyahu come and help us then. Let's let them help our allies, right? So-called. For some reason, that's not happening. I would think Trump would say, listen, Israel needs to help us. Israel needs to get in here and help us get these ships through so we don't have this global catastrophe of economics on our hands. But that's not happening. That's not happening at all. Now, Trump remains optimistic that NATO allies will ultimately get on board. I don't see that happening anytime soon, though. No, I don't think this is happening. I cannot see them risking what they have to help us in a war that has no bearing on national security or safety to the United States. I don't see it this way. Again, I don't see them invoking Article 5 of NATO. You know, one country's attacked, therefore we're all at war with this country. That's not going to be the case here. So Trump bit off more than he could chew, and he's understanding this. And he's seeing the economy crumbling all around him. And he knows he has people that are ignorant of the situation, like Hegseth, who are in charge of this. And he's hearing what he wants to hear, which is, Mr. Trump, this will be wonderful, this will be great for you, this is your legacy and all this. But we're not making any progress in this. It's just not working out. And I think he is starting to realize this right now. You saw Scott Bessent being pulled out of the interview that he was doing with, I believe it was NBC, if I'm not mistaken. And he came back visibly upset about whatever he spoke to President Trump about. But this is what's going on now. This is the reality of the situation. We are in uncertain times right now. We've never had something like the Strait of Hormuz cutting off 20% of the global oil supply from the rest of the world. We've never had this happen before, so we don't know what's going to take place. Will the markets crash? Will we see $200 barrel oil? We don't know. What does this mean for the global economies? What does it mean for the economies of Europe that are already largely in recessions right now? Does Asia come out as the winner of all this? Does China become the winner of all this? That still gets their oil. Only time will tell. So again, I told you folks, lack of planning, lack of strategy, lack of objectives leads to this type of chaos. The best thing for President Trump to do is to get out of this. Call it quits. Do whatever he wants. I don't care what he does. Sell us a story you want to sell us. I don't care what it is. Get us out of this conflict. But you didn't receive regime change, folks. We didn't get that. I think you're getting a much more hostile Iran as a result of this. Just my thoughts. And by the way, just so we're clear on all this, USA Today published that the number of American troops injured in Iran has now climbed to more than 200, 60 more than the total number from the Pentagon issued last week. It says 10 service members were currently seriously wounded. The vast majority suffered minor injuries, and more than 180 of them have returned back to duty. We have 13 service members killed so far after the KC-135 refueling. They're calling it a crasher. I'm saying it was hit by an surface-to-air missile. I think that's the case with this. I really have to be honest with you. I don't think that was a malfunction, because we would be told the malfunction. Yep, so there we go, folks. There we are. That is a lot of people being injured in this conflict, folks. By the way, this doesn't stop being Trump's hegemonic aspirations. I've got an article for us in CNBC. Trump says he thinks he will have the honor of taking Cuba. Taking Cuba. What does that mean, we're taking Cuba? We can't even take Iran. We're going to take Cuba now. Why is this all of a sudden Trump's thing? Did he run on any of this, by the way? Did he run in 2024 and say, listen, we're going to take over Cuba, we're going to take over Venezuela, we're going to take over Greenland, we'll go to war with Iran? No one would be buying that. By the way, he talked about being the peace president. He said if you vote for Kamala Harris, you get World War III. Well, it seems to be the opposite taking place right now. Most regional Americans do not want war. Yes, there are fringe lunatics that want this war. There's other people who are hoping that this war ends, and of course we are the victors of the war. Okay, that's fine, but the reality of the situation is that's not the case. Why are we talking about taking over Cuba right now? What is the purpose of this? It's unbelievable. He says, whether I take it, I free it, I take it, I think I can do anything I want with it, Trump said. So reporters in the Oval Office with Vice President J.D. Vance standing right behind him. They're a very weakened nation right now. Well, of course they are. You cut off the flow of oil coming in from Venezuela. That's what's taking place right now. So now they have no electricity in their country right now. So now they're really doing poorly. You know, John Mearsheimer he referenced a study that since 1971, I believe, is what he said, we've been responsible for about 38 million deaths across the globe because of our foreign policy. So that'd be things like crippling sanctions, for example. People not getting the resources they need and what have you. And now we're talking about they're a very weakened nation, right? Well, of course they are. Look what we do to them. It makes sense. Now, the president's comments on Cuba come as he carries out a war with Iran that is stretching into its third week now. Trump has now encouraged the people of Iran to dispose of their governments in the conflict, one of a litany of reasons he has given for starting this war. Well, again, the people of Iran don't want that. I don't know that the people of Cuba want to just hand their government over to the United States as well. Now, we know Cubans in the United States would like that, but what do the people inside Cuba want? Shouldn't that be the people that decide their future of their government, of which they live in? But look at this. Trump recently suggested he will turn his sights to Cuba after the U.S. achieves its aims inside Iran. He has threatened a friendly takeover of the Caribbean nation, which has been an adversary for the United States for decades, except for a brief position when Barack Obama was president. Yep. So now we're eyeing, we got Venezuela now working for us. We've got Cuba now in our, scopes. We're now looking at Venezuela. I'm sorry, we're looking at Greenland right now. I mean, what is this? This is nothing more than imperialism. That's what it comes down to. Again, the Cuba threats are just the latest of Trump's more aggressive foreign policy, which he all of a sudden enacted during his second term, folks. None of this was ever President Trump, ever, before these things began happening. Now we're just hearing about it and going, okay. What is the purpose of all this? When did you decide you were going to go take out the Venezuelan leader under ridiculous charges? When did you decide you wanted to take Greenland for national security purposes? And what does that even mean right now? Why are we in this war with Iran? We don't get the solid answers to this. Because I don't even know if President Trump knows this. So I don't know if his legacy he's shooting for. I don't know. I don't know if he wants to be seen as someone who's expanding the American empire. I really don't understand this. The Monroe Doctrine, what does that even mean? Most people don't even know what the Monroe Doctrine is, which again was just nothing more than a speech to Congress from President Monroe, which had nothing to do with taking over other nations or going after nations that were trading freely with other North and South American countries. It's just simply not the case. But this is where we find ourselves, folks. This is where we find ourselves. Cuba's in disarray right now. And again, it's not going to go well for them. Not by a long shot. Again, when you shut off the power, when you shut off the electricity, what are they going to do now? How are they going to get food? How are they going to do all these things? I mean, this is the reality of the situation, of course. And what are our plans when we take over this island? Should we take over this island? What are we going to do with the island? Do we call it just another island of America now? Do we add it? He's now calling for Venezuela to be the 51st state again. I don't understand this. Is Cuba going to be the 52nd? And then what do we do with this? What about Greenland? He wants to buy Greenland for $700 billion. Where are we going to get this money from? We're already spending between $1 and $2 billion a day on this Iran war. Money that we don't have. Well, we're $38.5 trillion in debt. Where are we getting this money from? Who's going to front it? Nobody seems to have the answers for this, unfortunately. All right, folks, let's move on. Let's stick with Venezuela for a moment. Let's do that. All right, this is an Armstrong Economics. And it's nothing short of the imperialism I was just discussing with you. It says, America taps Venezuela for rare earth minerals. Well, who couldn't have seen that coming? So the press is now reporting that Venezuela is opening up its mining sector to American companies, allowing foreign investment to extract gold, diamonds, of the rare earth minerals after the National Assembly approved the first step in rewriting the country's mining laws. Now, why would they do that? Gee, could it be because we have Delcy Rodriguez in place and she'll do whatever President Trump says so she can stay in charge of her country? I think so. Could this be the reason why we got Maduro out of there in the first place? I really think so. I don't think he's the kingpin behind a drug cartel out of Venezuela. I don't believe that for a second. Or the bogus machine gun charge we're throwing at him. You still can't go and kidnap they say kidnap, it's abduction. You can't go and abduct a world leader in the middle of the night the way we did that. There's extradition laws you follow. And although Venezuela doesn't really follow extradition laws, unfortunately, it violates international law what we did. But what was the purpose of it? Are the people of Venezuela free now? No, they have the exact same government in place now. But we just have a more friendly government to the United States. That's what it comes down to. And that's why we're very happy with Rodriguez just staying in that position. They didn't need to put in Machado. Again, who was going to be just nothing more than a puppet herself. So now this reform now for these mining laws extend the mining concessions from 20 to 30 years and allows international arbitration in disputes clearly designed to attract Western capital that had previously been locked out from under the old socialist system. Again, it's the same system. The United States is just simply exploiting it. So the real story is that the rare earths and the global race to secure them is the main issue here. That's what it comes down to. Now, Washington has already authorized transactions involving Venezuelans' gold through the state mining company and is working to bring American mining firms to the country. We just took, $100 million worth of gold assets out of that country just recently? That's what Doug Burgum just told us. So we're just taking stuff out. We're just taking it back to the United States now. I mean, this is what it comes down to. Are the people of Venezuela any richer now as we take this money? Are we paying them for this gold? Something tells me we're not. The move comes after the United States began reopening Venezuelans' oil sector to American companies as well, again signaling that the real objective is securing access to resources that have become strategically vital to the United States. Well, of course it was. Again, does anyone really believe that we're in Iran for the people of Iran? Do you think that the United States gives a damn about the people of Iran? Far from it. It's about regime change. It's about getting what you want. What else is inside Iran? Oil. And we want that oil. How do we know we want this oil? Because they've come out and told us this. I told you this last week. They came out and said, hey, look, Iran has a lot of oil they can utilize. We can come in there and start working on that. Well, of course, that's what it comes down to. You put Pavlovi in there, you give him lots of money, give him his little crown, whatever the hell he wants. And as a result of that, we get the oil in return. And that's exactly what Machado said she was going to do. She was going to sell out to the highest bidder, so long that she gets to stay in power. That's who that Machado woman is. And how she won the Nobel Peace Prize just shows you that the Nobel Peace Prize is a Nobel piece of garbage prize. That's what it comes down to. She's not a woman of peace. She's a woman who wants to sell out her country. This woman who started riots at military bases got hundreds of Venezuelans killed, by the way. This woman is not for peace. She actually petitioned. By the way, I said this to you a while back. I'll say it to you again for our new listeners. This is the same woman inside Venezuela, Maria Corina Machado. She actually petitioned Netanyahu's Likud party, that's the party in power right now, to invade Venezuela and install her as the president. She wanted Israel to invade Venezuela and install her. This is a woman of peace? I didn't think this woman could spell peace, to be honest with you. So let's be honest with you. And she gives President Trump her Nobel Peace Prize. Why? Because it's meaningless. The whole thing's meaningless. It's unbelievable when you come to think about it. But Trump sees Delcy Rodriguez. She understands she's next on the list of being abducted, thrown in U.S. jail for God knows how long. God knows if she's going to get any sort of due process, which I doubt. By the way, we've heard nothing about Maduro's case, have we? Has he been brought up on these drug charges? Where's the evidence for that? Nowhere to be found for anyone that looks for it. So what, he just rots in an American jail with his wife? After we killed 100 different people that night that we went in with Delta Force and took them out? Does Rodriguez want to be the next on that list, or is she going to play ball? Well, it seems like she's wised up and she's going to play ball. That's what it comes down to. And if she gets investment from America, from China, she'll be willing to do whatever she can to stay in power. That's the reality of the situation. Because remember, when she first got put in, right, as the vice president, she was the interim president, she said she wants Maduro back. Well, that wish has gone away. We haven't heard anything like that recently. And of course, President Trump talks about how great she is and how they're working together and what have you. Well, she's letting them just pillage the country. That's what it comes down to. That's what it is. And I still don't see any lucrative deals coming out of the oil, by the way. I really don't. Now, the mining sector, that might be a different story. But the oil itself is going to take a lot of investment, many billions of dollars of investments. So I'm talking like $183 billion worth of investments from these oil companies in the United States. And it costs a lot of money to refine this oil. That's just what it is. So this is why the United States has been quietly pursuing these mineral deals all around the world. The United States has already secured the preferential access to Ukraine's minerals. Again, he signed that with Zelensky. So we're set there. And that includes a significant deposits of graphene, titanium, lithium, other rare earths. Same thing goes on in Venezuela. So, again, folks, this is all strategic. If you want to talk about actual strategy, this is actually strategic now. Ukraine holds roughly 5% of the world's critical raw materials now. And we say, well, because of what we've given you, we want access to these, which Zelensky will hand over to stay in power, 100%. So, again, you make it strategically important in that mineral race because Trump understands that AI is the future. Refining rare earths is the future. So that's why we have that mineral deal between Washington and Kiev. It was never about economic reconstruction. It was about securing these long-term assets to these materials needed for the modern industry and, of course, the military technology that we want to possess. Because if we just let China control that market, we're screwed. I hate to say it to you like that, but that's the truth. But I do want to say one more thing about this, because this is very important as well. Unless we decide as a country that we're going to start refining these rare earths, which I think we should have already gotten behind last year, put something into effect at least. If we don't control these rare earths, and what I mean by that is, when we refine them, we take them out of the ground. If we don't refine them in the United States and have access to them, China, who controls over 90% of that market, can simply just shut us out of that market, if they decide to. And it doesn't matter to them because they control, again, over 90% of it. Some other countries control some minor amounts of the overall refining. China dominates the market. That means China dominates in the AI market. That means they control who gets what. Do we really want to leave China in charge of all that? Something tells me we don't. So, again, China itself, they've restricted rare earths and exports in the past. They've denied it to Japan. So what tells us that they wouldn't deny it to the United States? How do we know that they're not going to do that to end this conflict? Maybe that's how China steps into this. It says, listen, you keep this war going past whatever date, we're going to shut off your access to refining rare earths. We're not going to refine it for you anymore. You have to go elsewhere. And you don't do any of it, so you got to find someone that can do it. This is the reality of the situation. So it's very, very crucial that President Trump understands this and he gets this ball rolling. This is what he should be focusing on right now. Not a war in Iran, but actual development of refining rare earths inside the United States. Not just extracting them, but also refining them. That's what should be taking place right now. So that's why we're in Venezuela. That's why Maduro sits in a jail cell. That's why we're making deals with Zelensky. And this is why we want to go into Iran. We want to take the oil out of Iran as well. That's going to be very beneficial for many different people. People get rich off this. Never forget, people get rich off of war. That's the truth of the matter. There are people that get extremely wealthy off of war. Not just the people that own these defense contracts, but these individuals in the fields as well. That's what it comes down to. And on a side note, I want to talk about this article I have in Breitbart, again, talking about our own economy. We're talking about NAFTA now, which is, again, is an old phrase implemented back in 1994. But the free trade with Mexico, which, of course, chopped off a year off of many Americans' lives. What is this all about? Well, we know that, obviously, Wall Street wanted to send millions of U.S. jobs, particularly to lower-wage workers inside Mexico, because they would get bigger profits. That's what it was all about. And the civic cost described in the new study now titled Trading Goods for Lives, NAFTA's Mortality Impacts and Implications, it said in the first 15 years that NAFTA was implemented back in 1994, under Billy Clinton, right, that helped outsource many factory jobs in the United States, what they found was that about 3% of 45-year-old men lost a year of their remaining life expectancy as a result of the now trade deal. And this is what the researchers saw. They saw increases in mortality across major U.S. cities, and the major cause of death included illness, drug overdoses, suicides. In particular, the overall trends particularly affected working-age men who were more pronounced in the Southeast and in parts of the Midwest, like Michigan, for example. Again, once great state, once big manufacturer, now extremely hollowed out. Go look at Detroit if you want to see an example of what I'm talking about. But this is the reality of the situation. In the 15 years post-NAFTA, an area with an average NAFTA exposure experienced an increase in annual age-adjusted mortality of 0.68%, an increase that more than erases prior estimates of the welfare gains from NAFTA's nationwide economic benefits, which, again, were for the very few, not for the very many. This is what happens when you take out manufacturing in the United States. This is what happens when you have empty buildings now. And we talked earlier that, 20% of buildings all across America are sitting there empty right now? What happens when these business owners default on these businesses? Particularly these buildings. What are they going to do with them when there's nothing being produced inside? They default, that means the banks go under as well. So that's why I talked to you about the building bust. I talked to you about the AI bust that's coming. All these things are setting us up for a massive either recession or a depression. I pray that doesn't happen, but everything is indicating that it could be the case. Because we're not making in the United States like we once did. That's the big takeaway from all this. And as a result of it, you have a society that loses its purpose, people that lose their willpower. Obviously, they get into other things they shouldn't be, drugs, alcohol, you name it. Obviously, loss of wealth. Their kids end up doing worse than they do. These are the ramifications of NAFTA. And it should have been expressed at the time, very much so, that this shouldn't be a policy we should be enacting right now. We should not be outsourcing jobs. We should be working on getting more jobs in the United States. But this is what Bill Clinton did. This is what an administration did. This is what they wanted. And I want to read this to you as well. It says here, the pro-migration Atlantic reported on February 18th, said white-collar workers would go through what blue-collar workers went through beginning in the 1970s. Advances in machine technology improved productivity and depressed employment inside Detroit, inside Pittsburgh, Gary, Indiana, Worcester, Massachusetts. These Rust Belt communities fell apart and they never recovered. They're hollowed out. There's nothing there. There's nothing to develop. Then, of course, you have a devalued dollar, so now it costs even more to figure things out, to get things going, to get these investments. Yeah, good luck getting a loan from the bank to do something like that when you have no capital to put up for it. Then, of course, you have China joining the World Trade Organization in 2001. We have globalization spurring another round of losses inside the United States that followed as a result of that towards the end of this 15-year period, causing even more permanent damage. So you see these affected workers now ending up poor, they're less happy, and they're less healthy, they die sooner. Their families, their kids are worse off as a result. What's in that community for them? There's nothing there. There's nothing to grow. There's nothing to develop. And again, we're seeing that all throughout these Rust Belt states. As a result of that, what did President Trump run on? He ran on bringing back this manufacturing in the United States. What manufacturing has he brought back to the United States? Which is why I was really happy when he talked about the $21 trillion investments into the United States. So this is good. This is what we need. People are investing back in the United States, not just outsourcing to other countries like China. We need this. We need to start doing that. This will bring up the middle class. This will offer better jobs. But that doesn't happen. And the reason it doesn't happen is because, well, number one, those investments haven't gone anywhere. And number two, we're still doing the exact same thing. Our policies are still depleting jobs. We lost over 100,000 manufacturing jobs that we had at the start of 2025, then at the start of 2026. We're going in the wrong direction. So if we want to start building America, President Trump has got to understand he's got to bring back the manufacturing. Bring back the manufacturing in these jobs from China. That's what it comes down to. So President Trump, he's zigzagging through these complex issues. He's touting AI while, of course, shrinking migration to pressure CEOs to hire more Americans for higher productivity jobs. But at the same time, he's also trying to bring in more H-1B visa holders. That's another big problem. So we got to see the situation here. Why bring in H-1B visa holders to take these good-paying jobs when we could have Americans do it here in the United States that are from the United States? How does that benefit? When you bring in foreign labor, probably to get it at a cheaper price, of course. That's what it always comes down to. That's why Republicans always love this. That's why they back these programs, like the H-1B visas and others just like it. But it doesn't benefit the American people that voted for him. That's what it comes down to. And then in contrast, on the other side of it, you have left-wing advocates. They're pushing for welfare programs, universal welfare, governmental dependence, right? You've heard of universal basic income. So that means when the jobs are no longer there, the work, the purpose, the hope, you sit on a universal basic income. Elon Musk has talked about it. Mark Zuckerberg has talked about it. I don't think it's beneficial to a society just to pay people to simply exist. People have to have purpose. People have to have meaning. And so long as you deplete that, you get what we see here in this article. Ending up poorer, less happy, less healthy, dying sooner. Maybe that's their plan all along. Who knows? Let's move on, folks, to something a little trivial, but again, it's still somewhat positive, I guess, for the Trump administration. At least this is a plus for them. Out of Slay News, it says that appeals court hands major win to President Trump, greenlights rapid deportations to third nations. Now, while I'm very much for deporting illegal aliens, as many of you know, again, I don't think people that are out of our jurisdiction belong inside the United States. I think that's ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous any country should even put up with that. But now we've got a federal appeals court, has now lifted a lower court order by blocking a key immigration policy from President Trump's administration, allowing officials to resume deporting illegal aliens to countries other than their own. Now, in a 2-1 decision, the First U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals granted the administration's request to pause a prior ruling that had declared the policy unlawful. So now this decision now allows the policy to remain in effect while the case moves forward on appeal. Probably moving over to SCOTUS next to hear the case. Here's my problem with this. Again, I want the deportations, I want illegal aliens to be gone. They have no right to be inside the United States. And a country cannot survive by having tens of millions of illegals in its country, utilizing its housing, the schools, the hospitals, you name it. The jobs, right? They get they get jobs, they get underpaid, of course, but they work under the table, yet still accessing governmental programs. You can't do that. It doesn't work out that way. We're seeing that play out right now. So here's the problem. We have the administrative lawyers now arguing that the lower court's decision interfered with the federal government's ability to enforce immigration law. But the district court's orders creates an unworkable scheme that impairs the ability of the government to enforce its immigration laws. That's what the Justice Department wrote. But at the same time, you're not allowing due process to these people. That's the problem. You have to have due process when you're doing this, no matter what. Everyone has a right to due process in this country. That's what the Fifth Amendment tells us. We have to have this. And then I don't understand, though. This is the part of it I guess I don't understand. Why you would deport people from a particular country and send them to a third country where they're not of or from. So, for example, in the article, it talks about how they want to send 8 migrants to be deported to South Sudan, signaling the High Court's willingness to allow the policy to proceed while the litigation continues on. Why would you send someone to the South Sudan if they're not from there? So, in other words, if someone's from Mexico, let's say, and you send them to South Sudan, what is the purpose of that? Why would you not just send them to their country of origin? It doesn't make any bit of sense to anybody, does it? So that's why the plaintiffs are arguing the provisions violate your statutory, your constitutional protections, your due process. That is allowed to everybody. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're going to say, well, Gervais, come on, they're not citizens. In other words, they don't have any rights. Well, that's not necessarily true. The Fifth Amendment says any persons. It doesn't say any citizens. It says persons. So once you're inside the United States, you are allotted certain rights. That doesn't mean you have a right to own a firearm because you're not a citizen. But there are certain rights when it comes to law enforcement, and this is just one of them. You still have to give somebody due process. So in other words, you cannot circumvent that due process just because you want to kick out more people quickly. So the appeals court ruling does not resolve the underlying legal questions, but it allows the policy to remain active during this appeals process. That's what it comes down to. So I think the courts, they should strike this down, though, because, again, due process has to occur. You have to allow someone due process so they have the opportunity to prove who they are, right? That should be the way it works. And once they're found as not being able to do that, once they lose their day in court, then it's right to deport these people. That's what it comes down to. And that's why I think, while right now it seems like Trump is winning in this, I think the courts will end up striking this down if they're following the Constitution. If they're not following the Constitution, then who knows, maybe they'll continue to do this. I just don't understand why you would send someone across the globe to another country which they're not from. You have to send them back to their original jurisdiction. That seems like the most, at least that's the most reasonable case about all this. Send them to their country of origin. That's where they are a citizen. That's where they belong. They don't belong in a third country. God only knows what would take place there. All right, folks, we got a couple minutes remaining in the program today. Let me talk really quickly about the White House now applying tighter oversight now to RFK Jr.'s HHS after certain setbacks. You know, we were all very hopeful about MAHA taking over, making America healthy again. Obviously, President Trump is an ally of Kennedy's, and Kennedy originally was doing a very good job about what's taking place. But now it seems like the Trump administration is giving more operational oversight to this organization. And I think a lot of it has to come with the corporations that are being affected by this. So in other words, for example, if Kennedy upends the vaccine schedule for children and kids decide, hey, they don't need to do this, and they start utilizing less vaccination, well, that is a profit loss for a lot of this big pharma that has lots of donations and, of course, advertising and what have you, and lots of money, by the way, to lobby. They lose out on this big time. Same thing goes with the food dyes and the food coloring and the what have you inside lots of things like cereal, for example. These businesses have lots of money they can put forth to lobby Congress. They can lobby the president to keep the operations as functioning as is. So we can look at disagreements over vaccine policies he's had, which are absolutely right, by the way. By the way, we should be testing these. I haven't heard anything out of the NIH as a result of the study they were supposed to be doing. As of September last year, they were supposed to have the effects of taking several of these vaccinations that have zero safety testing for decades now. we should be looking into these things. We should know that things we're putting in our bodies are healthy. At first he came out against the glyphosate, for example. And everyone was happy about that. Let's get rid of this glyphosate. Let's get rid of these GMOs. Let's start planting real crops again. And then quietly, they pushed back a little bit, and they finally kind of just went away with it. They decided, we're not going to pursue this. We'll still allow people to use glyphosate. Why would you let people use a cancer-causing agent in the crops in the United States? I mean, it never made any sense to me. Why would you do that? Doesn't make, again, if we're making America healthy again, you're not going to make America healthy again by giving them products that can cause cancer. That's why none of these things never made any sense to me. But it does make sense now when you have people, these allies of Trump, in the White House, having much more significant power over what's taking place in HHS. They're going to try to thwart RFK Jr.'s positions, set him back a little bit, let him have some victories here and there. But the big issues, they're going to make sure that they win on. That's the way I see things going on from here on out. Folks, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you so much. That'll do it for today's show. Hope you learned something. Share with others if you can. Keep your minds and bodies strong. Have a great rest. I'll see you back here tomorrow for more groundbreaking news on the next Marco Dre Show. Until then, be good. God bless.